If any of the panelists have a final remark, we do have to wrap it up. No?
Maybe on the last point, last question, a few things can be said. These figures, I have in fact worked with a recent project on the Turkish perception of the Kurds in Turkey and vice versa. And there are, in fact, really worrying signs in that respect. That more and more Turkish people, for example, do now say that they do not want a neighbor, a Kurdish neighbor, or a business partner, or spouse. These are signs of social polarization. And there are several reasons for that. In fact, for Turks being the majority in society, they are much less likely to have personal experience in their environment, social environments, with a person of Kurdish origin. In fact, this mixing in the urban areas are more recent than in fact we thought. And let's think about in what context has this mixing taken place. It has really taken place in an environment of a very violent conflict between the state and the PKK. So, for many people who were not even aware, either through education or through personal experience, that even, in fact, there is an ethnic group in Turkey called the Kurds. Their first exposure to that has been in the context of a violent conflict. So, in fact, as a social scientist, in fact, I would have expected these figures, in fact, even higher, just considering the fact that so much pain and suffering has occurred and violence has occurred in the last 30 years or so. But nevertheless, I think these are really they are ringing alarm bells as far as the social potential social conflict between Turks and Kurds are concerned, and that's why I fully agree that we do need the leadership and the political courage at this point, and taking positions that sometimes that might be even not be very popular prevailing public opinion. That's what statesmanship requires.
Dr. Barkey, last word.
Let me just suggest that politics is not linear. Politics doesn't go, you don't go from one place to another in a straight line. It always goes ups and downs. You make it's 2 steps forwards, 1 step backwards. Sometimes it's 1 step forward, 2 steps backwards. But the underlying issue here is that you always have a certain dialectical process. There's conflict. It doesn't always have to be armed conflict, but you have conflict. People think to go look back in the 1990s and say, well, there were not all these political parties, especially the center-right parties and the FARC party, used to have all kinds of Kurdish MPs. Well, do you think those Kurdish MPs joined those parties because they wanted to join those parties? Because this was the way they essentially pushed their own agendas, they made their own deals, and it always was part of their own struggle as to how to bring resources to the communities, how to fight the state. They were part of the ruling parties often, but also militated against the ruling party. So it was always politics has always been very complex, especially when it comes to the Kurdish question. And we, in many ways, as researchers, as people who work on Turkey, also kind of discovered the Kurdish question as recently. I mean, it hasn't been a big issue since. It's only been a big issue since the late 80s, especially the 1990s. So, but in fact, it has a long history. There's been rebellion after rebellion in Turkey on the Kurdish question. And we have come to essentially to a point here where I think there's an understanding that it has to be resolved. I mean, you have even, government officials who talk to you about, oh yes, we have to resolve the Kurdish question. And I remember, in the 1990s when I started working on this issue, every government official you talk to, they said, Kurdish? What Kurds? Right? They don't exist. There was never a Kurdish problem. People are equal in Turkey. I mean, you got all this matter. So things move. And yes, it is true that the electoral system is such that you have these discrepancies in Diyarbakir, in every other province in Turkey. But I believe that we have come to Turkey is about to cross the Rubicon. It will have to resolve this problem, because if it doesn't, the consequences at this stage are going to be far different than the period of the 30s or the 40s or even the 90s. Because we are in the 21st century. There is an Arab Spring out there. I mean, even in the Arab world, you have a move toward democratization. And believe me, what's happening in Arab Spring is being watched very carefully in the Kurdish communities in Turkey. People are learning. It's not. There's a two-way process going on there. So I think Turkey is going to have to move. It's going to be messy, and and there will be progress, and there will be move toward backwards progress, if you want. But it will have to move. Turkey, I don't think Turkey has a choice.
Thank you. I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it at that. I'd like to thank the
We will give a 15-minute coffee break and convene at 3:30.